welcome back to Philanthropy. On today's episode, we are going to be talking trauma with an amazing, wonderful trauma training. My good friend Jill Yahn is here to join us. Hi, Jill. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good.
Welcome to Philanthropy. So I'll let you know that the reason that I know Jill is because when I was a principal, this was my last post where I was a principal, and we had the first year that I was there, a lot of crisis, a lot of trauma, and I recognize this. And so I tried really hard to bring in a trauma trainer. I was struggling, and I had all kinds of obstacles, and it was almost like a miracle just with the timing and how everything lined up. And suddenly Jill was there. And, the angel she is, like, look at her. She already looks like an angel. And that's how she appeared. Like, she descended from the clouds. And she was like, I can do that training for you. And I was like, oh, hallelujah. And so she showed up and she did a 2-day training with our staff, which was phenomenal. And then the next year, again, we had some staff who had joined us and they had never done any trauma training, and also some who wanted a refresher. So we brought Jill back for another day, and her teaching was just immaculate and so helpful because it really helped us to understand what a lot of students are going through and how we can be better responsive as educators so that we're not triggering in a lot of situations. So Jill, if you want to tell us maybe a little bit how you got started with all of this.
Sure. I've been teaching for about 15 years. It was actually when I was coming back from a maternity leave. I took a temporary contract at a school, and I was with the grade 5 class for, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. And that's when we got sent home for COVID. And so that was stressful enough as it was. But while I was with that group, trying to connect with them online, and it was a pretty rowdy bunch of boys for the most part, they were a lot of fun. But we actually had a pretty big tragedy happen at our school that it directly affected the class that I was teaching, and I did not have the tools. I had no idea what to do. I reached out to a couple of speakers that had come to our schools here in North Battleford a couple of times just to see if they could help me out. And the advice that I got was it was so beyond ridiculous. The one lady said, "Oh, just, give them hugs and bring them food." I was like, I'm not sure if you noticed, but we kind of have a pandemic happening and we're all locked in our houses. So anyway, it was a completely helpless feeling. So I did a bunch of research, and Star Commonwealth actually is an organization in the States. They sent out some free courses for teachers to take while we were all kind of locked up and whatever. And it was all about trauma and resilience. And so the more I did, the more I needed to do, because it was all the tools that I needed. It was what my class needed. And as it turned out, after I had completed all my training with them, then the next year I ended up with that same group and I taught them grade 6. So we got to use all of the tools that I had learned, how to help them through their grief and heal through some of those things. So it was pretty cool that way. The last few years, I've been doing behavior intervention at our high school in town. So that's been a pretty incredible experience. And then just this year, I actually started a new job as a learning resource teacher at one of the reserves close by. So lots of learning there too.
That's really awesome. And so I was really interested in bringing you on to philanthropy because, of course, your knowledge about trauma and how we can work with people who are experiencing trauma, that interested me because I thought, a lot of the listeners, they might not be students, they might not even be educators, but they certainly can be somebody who has experienced trauma or has maybe recognized it in the people around them. And so if they're listening and and wanting to learn more about trauma, like what are some things that you like to, share with educators about, maybe some do's and don'ts with trauma?
I think the biggest thing for most people is understanding what trauma actually is. Trauma is not a horrible thing that's happened. It's not an event. The horrible thing that happened can cause trauma, but the event itself isn't the trauma. The trauma comes in how we internalize that event that happened, or that series of events, or whatever it was, and how that event then, how it shapes our perception of everything and our private logic. So how did that thing that happened affect my view of myself, my view of other people, my view of the world? And then it's our responses that we have to the event that actually is the trauma. There's a lot of misconceptions. So one of my best examples when I'm trying to explain that to people is, we had a pretty significant event happen at our high school a few years ago, where we had to go on lockdown. It was a pretty public event by the end of it, or whatever, because the kids were taking videos. And so we had this big thing that happened in our school. And there were roughly 1,200 students. There's like 150-ish staff. Each one of those people had their own interpretation and their own internalization of that event. Some of those kids, after, we never saw them again because it was so much for them and it triggered so many things. Some of those kids went home to some stability and some a secure place and a safe place, and they were able to walk themselves through it and whatever, and they came back the next day. Obviously everybody's rattled by it. I'm not minimizing the event, but they were able to take it and go, holy crap, and then come back down from that. And so they internalized it and dealt with it in a completely different way. So for some of them it was triggering and traumatic. For some of them it was just a really big horrible thing that happened, if that makes sense. Right. And I think
Mhm.
that that's one of the biggest misconceptions about trauma, that we think that every single big bad thing that happens is going to be traumatic, and that's not true. It can be, and it doesn't actually have to be something big, horrible thing too that can be traumatic either, right? Say as a baby, as an infant, if you cry and somebody comes to you and makes you feel better, and then you understand that you internalize that I can be upset and I can be calmed back down again. I can trust people that will come and make me feel better. I'm valued. I'm important, right? So if as an infant you have those things, your private logic rate from the beginning is different than somebody who maybe as an infant, if they were crying and nobody came. Right. Or if they cried, sometimes somebody came to make them feel better, but sometimes somebody came and it made it worse. Right. So they don't have that little dance that happens to make their worldview a safe one, right? So it, then when you look at an event that's completely separate from that, those two babies would internalize and perceive that thing completely different. Right. So I think that that's one of the biggest things around this whole trauma informed approach that we're all trying to do, that we really need to understand better.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about, especially that we have different reactions and responses to trauma, and so maybe we may or may not unpack it. Recently, I've seen this meme out, or not maybe a meme. It's like one of these posts that circulates on Facebook, and people have this thought, educators actually, and it says, educators should not be doing the job of responding to trauma. Their job is to teach, and we are overstretching our educators by making them like social workers and all of these things. And it was really like kind of like a hyped up, maybe exaggerated kind of post. What are your thoughts on that, like, response?
Well, I mean, as a teacher who has felt taxed and exhausted, I get it and I understand the intent there. But kids don't put the rest of their life outside and only bring in their math brain, right? We're not there to teach math. We're there to teach people. And people are complex and they're messy and it's layered. And if we as the educators aren't ready to teach people, then maybe we need more tools in our tool bag. As a teacher, it is not my responsibility to listen to other people's stories and interpret and give it. I'm not qualified for that anyways, right? But I can see that a student is not okay and react appropriately, right? If somebody's coming into my classroom dysregulated, that doesn't mean we're going to not, nobody's doing math now. We're all going to stop and we're going to talk to little Johnny and that's not what I'm saying. recognizing that sometimes little Johnny's not okay and he can't do the math right now. And we as educators have to be prepared for that scenario because that's reality. Sometimes I come into the classroom and I'm not quite ready to teach math either because something happened on my way to school, right? So we don't teach subjects, we teach people.
Thank you. I think that's a really beautiful answer and sort of along the lines of what I was thinking too, that really having this kind of trauma training doesn't give you the skills necessarily to unpack it for somebody else. That's not your job, exactly what you said, but more so that it helps us to identify who's ready to learn, who's not ready to learn. And so I really think that that's a good response that, you know, maybe some educators who are feeling maybe overwhelmed need to understand where their own boundaries are, right? Maybe they've been overextending themselves. Maybe they've been doing more, you know, work helping to support kids emotionally than they need to be doing, you know, and that's not to say that we should turn a blind eye to anybody suffering, but also recognizing that in any school, there's going to be resource people that you can be reaching out to who can support a student emotionally. Like, for instance, when I think of my high school, I didn't task that to my teachers. You know, I simply said, please understand and notice when somebody is being triggered so that you don't make the situation worse.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have a teacher and a student fist fighting in the hallway because that could happen, right? With
Yep.
tempers and, you know,
Yep.
and a situation blowing out of proportion, or maybe not even a teacher, just another, you know, support staff or somebody, you know, things can get hairy really fast. And so, but to understand that, you know, if somebody is consistently coming in dysregulated, that, you know, we may have a larger issue that we need to address. And that's where you know, you pull in those resources that we have. You know, we had guidance counselors, we had elders, you know, we had different agencies that we could connect to, and, you know, and maybe we could build some support for that student and their family if it was their family undergoing stress, that
Yeah.
it didn't need to be a teacher's job to sit there and, you know, stay after hours and unpack a kid's trauma, that wasn't their job, right?
Yeah.
And so tell me, maybe if you can, some tips for somebody if you notice somebody is maybe dysregulated. And I think that there can be different expressions of dysregulation. I
Yeah.
don't know, like, I'm assuming for myself, and I know I don't haven't had as much training as you, I'm assuming that you have to first maybe understand somebody's baseline, like what is their natural kind of behavior. Because I think my experience was that I noticed when students were often exploding, they always ended up in my office. And I had that conversation with our guidance counselors when people were, you know, flying off their walls and really we're having a real loud emotion right now. Then they ended up in my office. But our guidance counselors would often tell me when people were imploding, and this
Yeah.
is where we saw suicide ideation and self harm. And so I think for me, that has just kind of been something that resonated, that I needed to understand a baseline to notice what the behavior was that was dysregulated. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, dysregulation is just, I mean, it can either be an overactive or an underactive response, right? So you either way you're getting stuck in an emotional response to something. And I honestly preferred the kids that were kicking desks and throwing books and swearing at me to the ones that were hood up, head down. Those ones, for me anyways, it was harder for me to feel like I could connect in any way for them. But both of those things are dysregulation when somebody's stuck in those emotions and they just get stuck in their cycle. And part of that is because your brain can't actually tell the difference between a real threat and a perceived threat, and it sends the exact same signal either way. And I think it's really important as the adults who are supposed to be bringing calm to somebody else's storm that we remember that. I use the analogy of a smoke detector where if you burn your toast, your smoke detector is going to go off. If your house is burning down, your smoke detector is going to go off and it's going to sound exactly the same. it can't tell the difference, right? It's just to alert you that there is a problem. And then you're supposed to be able to think it through. Do I need to leave or do I need to unplug the toaster, right? There's things that you're supposed to be able to think. But in your brain, once that smoke detector goes off, the thinking part of your brain is gone. And so we're just reacting. And so that's when we have those kids that just seem to get stuck in that spot. And so then when you have an adult come to that situation, so say you have somebody losing their marbles in the hallway and whatever, and an adult with the intent of trying to help is what they'll say, but what they're actually trying to do is control, it ends up making it worse, right? So if you think of somebody who is drowning and they're flailing and they're screaming that they need help, that is not the time for a water safety lesson. Hand them the life jacket and back off. That's your job. That's it. It's until somebody is regulated and their thinking brain has come back and they've relaxed, they can't hear you anyways, right? Nobody actually calms down in the middle of a fit with somebody yelling at them, calm down, like that. It doesn't actually work that way, right? And so
All
I think that
husbands take note.
just calm down. Yeah.
Particularly applies to husbands. Just kidding.
To get our kiddos from that state of dysregulation into a place where they can actually think things through, we have to create spaces for them where they can actually separate their response from the stimulus so that they can think it through. They need that mindful moment of just pause. We're going to let your brain catch up to your body, right? This is a physical response. One of my favorite things to do with those kids, once everybody was safe, but you could still tell somebody was really not okay, was co-regulation is one of my favorite things to do. And it's not just, and I haven't just used that with students, I've used it with colleagues as well who were clearly not okay, where their nervous system is going to directly be impacted by my nervous system with some proximity. So I will be very intentionally calm. I will talk a little bit slower, a little bit softer. My breathing will be intentional. And my nervous system, the energy, they will eventually calm down. My favorite example of that, I had one kiddo in grade 8, and he had what people would describe as a very short temper, a very explosive temper. He would come into my room and his knuckles would just be white and his jaws clenched and he's just vibrating, and he'd come and he'd sit down and his legs would just be shaking. And that's not the time to ask him, what do you need? How are you doing? Can I get you a snack? Right? Like he's not able to talk right now. He can't explain. So it's my job as the adult to recognize that he's not okay. And so the first time I did it, I went and I sat beside him and he kind of like, he wasn't sure what I was doing. And that's all I did. I just, and then eventually I could feel his energy just evening out a little bit. And then it was more of a, do you need some water? Right? Like it was just little things like that. It's okay to be pissed off. We got to be intentional with our reactions to it. Right? So things like that. And lots of those things you want to do proactively with people too, right? So you teach them how to start recognizing those things in themselves. So I just did my 2-day workshop with a staff. And it's not just to give them tools to work with their students, it's so that they can recognize those things in themselves too. Your body tells you what to do before you've thought about anything, right? You have physical reactions to things before you've really thought it through. Mine, for me, anytime I get a little bit nervous or a little bit upset or I start thinking about, I get this rash right here. And so before I even know what I am thinking about, before I've paid attention to it, I start getting this rash. And I taught that to a group of grade 7s. And so it got to be the point where they would be like, oh, Miss Yahn, you got the rash. Are you okay? Right? And so like recognizing your body will send you signals that it needs something different, right? And so a lot of our responses to those things, they have to wait. We want to correct behavior. We want to control somebody else's behavior. And that illusion of control, it angers me a lot because you have kids that will comply, but those kids were okay, right? They're probably fine. It's the kids that aren't okay. And it's not because they're choosing to not comply. It's because they're telling you they're not okay. And we misinterpret that and we take it personally. a lot of times as educators. So
I really like your thought on when, let's say, you said the kid came to you and, he's white knuckled and he's upset. And, I think that's a powerful thing to keep in mind that when somebody is dysregulated, they might not even know what they need. And so that is a question that, could potentially trigger them more if they're like, I feel so out of place and everything's wrong, and they don't even know why, right?
well,
And so I think that's really powerful that, you see it, and you went to co-regulation, and then as he calms down the nervous system, then you can start, questioning and unpacking the what could be the need, just the same that we would do with a baby who is upset, right? That they can't talk and they can't tell us what's upset. So we go through the checklist. Is the kid too hot? Is the kid hungry? Does the kid have a poopy diaper? When you go through all those needs, and see what it is that the kid responds to best with, right? And so I think
yeah.
that's a really powerful reminder for us that when we see somebody dysregulated, that's not the time for, and that's something that I would say often with our staff too, that let's say that there was a kid who broke a rule. They did something that was against our rules in school, and then and maybe somebody approached them about it, and they got really upset and triggered, and now they go into defense mode. And so I would say to our staff, that's not the time to enforce a rule, right? Like this, at this moment, we need this person to be calmer. And that doesn't mean we're ignoring or negating or condoning any kind of behavior. It just means that we need a little bit of time. We need people to enter their logic mind, like you said, be able to bring that logical mind back. And that those events don't have to happen at the exact same time. And that's where I would often see a power struggle with our staff. Generally, it would be male staff because men are often assume that disciplinarian role. And so then they think I have to enforce rules, exactly what you said about control, and not understanding that that is like detaching from the situation, and the needs of that person who is dysregulated. And then by, trying to enforce this rule, now that adult also can become dysregulated. And now we have a power
Absolutely.
struggle. Now we have a situation, right? And so that was really important to me for the staff, that they understood that we can address the behavior later. It doesn't have to be in this moment, right? We can definitely, when the kid is calmer, sit down. Of course, they're going to reflect in their behavior, and they're going to say, almost like 99% of the time, they're like, sorry, I know I did wrong. I shouldn't have done this, blah, blah, blah. But in that moment, oh no, you're just going to have a fist fight,
Yeah, and
right?
I think that's one of the things that I get asked a lot too, is because, oh well, you're just giving them an excuse then, and that's not what this is. Understanding trauma is not giving people an excuse to act a certain way. That's not at all. It's a reason why they are acting the way they're acting and responding the way they're responding. It's a reason, but it's not an excuse. We don't excuse behaviors. What this is meant to do is to inform how we approach these kids and approach our colleagues and other people out in the world, right? We try to approach them with a little bit of grace. I'm not going to It takes just as much energy to assume somebody cut me off intentionally when we're driving that it does to assume that they actually had somewhere they really needed to go, right? Takes the exact same amount of energy. So I'm just going to give you the grace. I'm just going to assume you really needed to get there to that same light that we're both going to 4 seconds before me, but that's fine, right?
Yeah.
But
I always say they're in a hurry to die. They're going to get there sooner.
yeah, I don't know. It's just, and so then I'll get pushback, and somebody will say, "Oh yeah, it's because he's got an unmet need. That's why he told me to F off." And well, okay, so maybe in that particular moment, it's not exact, but this is a pattern that he does, right? So if you look at every time he's felt threatened or made to feel silly, he comes at you with anger. Yes, that is an indication of an unmet need. right? I'm not saying it's okay for the kid to come at you and to threaten or to swear at you. Absolutely not. And we will address that. But if all we do to him is say, we're going to punish you for swearing today, okay, well, and he'll just swear at you tomorrow. We haven't actually fixed anything. We haven't dealt with anything. And I guess fix is not the right word either. We are not here to fix people. They're not broken. That's not what they need. They need opportunities to experience something different, right? So if you're talking about somebody whose private logic says to them, I'm not valuable, I'm not worth your time, then it's my job as the adult to show them that actually look at all these times when you are important, right? We give them the opportunities to experience something totally different. I had a group of kids that I worked pretty close with for a couple of years, and one of the things that I know was lacking in their worlds was a place where they felt like they could actually contribute, right? They've always been like given a handout. They've always been had somebody else solve a problem for them. They've had no input in any way, shape, or form. So we went and we set up a program with our custodian where they got to go and down and do things with the furnace and learn things from him. We went and volunteered at the animal shelter, right? There's opportunities at the food bank, somewhere where they could actually feel like they were contributing in a meaningful way. And actually, one of their favorite things to do was cook for each other. So
Aw.
they got to plan a meal and cook and serve it to each other, and then they had to clean it up too, right? We had to teach them that. And I think that's one of the things too, like going back to what you had said earlier about educators feeling like this isn't my job, this is my job. Well, okay, but maybe when you get somebody into your room and you're teaching grade 6 and you want to teach grade 6 math and they get to, and as it turns out, they don't know how to add. That's a grade 1 skill. So do you just go, I guess we're not going to do math? Or do you go back to that grade 1 skill and you start building it, right? It's no different with these kids that to ask lots of them, well, what do you need? First of all, they've never had anybody actually ask them that. So there's no way for them to know, right? So we gotta go back, and we have to scaffold those skills too. I use zones of regulation a lot in my teachings with the kids, and I use it with the staff too, with my EAs, where green, like you're good, you're calm, your energy's good, you're ready to learn, everything feels okay. Yellow, you're vibing a little bit high. You might be excited. You might feel a little silly. Could be lots of different things, nervous about something. Your energy's high. You can still learn, but you have to like put some effort into it. You can still make good choices, but you got to put some effort into it. And then you go blue, which is super low energy. There's no learning there. We're tired, we're sad, we're worried, we're not okay. Or we go the opposite, red, where energy is way too high. I'm making stupid choices. I am not learning. I'm about ready to throat punch somebody. Like it's not okay. And so as a teacher, I have to then, if they haven't had that, at some point where they haven't internalized that I can feel not good, but then I can do things to get myself better, then that's my job, right? So get them to recognize, where are you, right? And so that kiddo that would come in with his white knuckles, he would say to me, my whole body's red, right? Like so he would tell me that way sometimes. And so we do all of our techniques. How do we get back to green, right?
Mm,
We don't always want to be comfortable, right? We need a little bit of stress one way or the other, because otherwise we
yeah,
turn into slug. It's when
yeah.
you feel a little stressed, then you get to be creative in your thinking, you get to problem solve, you get to think your way through things. But it's also important to recognize that you shouldn't live in yellow, you shouldn't live in red or blue, right? Like we want to get back to green as often as we can, teaching them the strategies to get back there. So it's not something that lots of people can't do, trauma or no trauma. It's a skill that you have to practice just like anything else. If you're going to be on a hockey team, right? Like you're not just going to go into the game and know how to do all the things. Like you got to go to the practices and learn the skills first before you actually do it. So you're not going to just, as soon as you're dysregulated, know how to get out of that.
Mm, so powerful. I really want to just stop and kind of talk about that point that you just made, that this has been kind of something that I feel like I've been seeing it quite often in a lot of podcasts, that I really think that there is value in all of the emotions that we experience, that there is value in anger, there's value in sadness, if you unpack that emotion and you understand, why am I feeling sad? Why am I feeling angry? Exactly what you said, that we need to understand what is the need that is not being addressed. What do I need to do to shift my inner landscape or my outer landscape in order so that I'm going to feel calmer and more satisfied with life and happier? But I love that you said that we don't want to stay in anger. We don't want to stay in sadness. This is where we have all the health problems. Like if we
Mm.
stay in sadness, then we're going to have depression. If we stay in anger, we might have a heart attack. Like there are real physical consequences to wallowing in some of these emotions for too long. But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that it's wrong or it's bad to feel angry. And I've said that to a lot of, especially kids, because I think the messaging that many of us receive growing up is that having a negative emotion is a bad thing, and then you
Yeah.
feel that you're a bad person. And I don't like that messaging. I'm a big pusher of, let's unpack the emotion, that the emotion's there for a reason. It's there to teach us, but we don't want to stay there. We want the green zone to kind of be most of the time where we're sitting, because then we'll feel calmer, we'll feel more peaceful and that sort of thing. But that doesn't mean we won't still feel all of these emotions at some point or other.
Yeah. I think it's also important though to recognize that sometimes our emotions are inaccurate. So
How do you
it
how do
is
you how do you mean?
okay. So if somebody is, and it could be, so trying to give you an example. Okay, so walking down the hallway and somebody behind you yells, and for you it's an immediate scare because it was a trigger. That's one of your things. Loud noises, loud voices, that's one of your things. So I feel scared, and that, like, yes, in the moment I do, but I have to stop. Am I actually safe? Right? Like, you actually have to stop and like, is that a valid feeling right now? Like,
Mm,
no, like nothing's happening. There's nothing actually happening back there, right? And so sometimes we tend to react and we hold our feelings as the truth when it's just
mm,
our perception of something. It's not the truth, right? It's not necessarily the whole truth. It's just our reaction to something. And sometimes our private logic and our perceptions are inaccurate. And that's
mm,
where we have to stop and do some reflecting, right? Um, as a Gen Xer, we have this image of like, nah, we're tough and we're whatever, and we'll just keep doing the things. We don't say no to people and all of those things. And some of these newer generations coming along are very much like, that's a boundary for me. I don't think so, right? I think there's lots that we
mm,
can learn from them, but I also think that it's possible to go too far with that, right? So as soon as I'm feeling uncomfortable, nope, I'm putting my boundary up. You made me feel uncomfortable. Well, what if they were right? And your feeling being pushed and uncomfortable was actually what you needed to stop and think about and learn, right? So there's that protecting your own peace and setting up this little protective boundary for yourself, which it can also be very unhealthy.
so powerful. I love these thoughts. I love where you're going with this. I want to circle back to what you're saying about how our feelings can be a reaction and they can be automatic, and it
Yes.
doesn't mean that it is necessarily the whole truth of a situation.
Yeah.
And the reason that I love that, of course, you know me, and I love having difficult conversations. Not that it's my thing, but it kind of is my thing, because it's something that is just not very explored, or there's not a lot of training around it for leaders. And so it's kind of been my thing. And I always say to people that, you know what, when you have a difficult conversation, oftentimes we need to be open to learning from the other person, because you only have half a truth. And your truth, it may be true for you in the moment until you learn more information and you learn the other party's side. And then you go, wow, now I can understand why you said that and why you did that. And I got offended because my ego got involved. And so now I'm understanding the whole situation. And now I'm understanding in that moment, if I had had that piece of information, maybe I would have been a little bit more patient, and maybe I would have been more understanding. And thank you for helping me to understand, because now I can be more graceful in this situation. Whereas maybe initially I was kind of an ass just because I thought, oh my God, this person is attacking me.
Right.
So I love that. That is really, really powerful, that your emotions can be the result of a thought that you're having, and the thought may not be the whole truth. Because I do believe that oftentimes our emotions and our thoughts are sandwiched together, and we don't always understand the thought that makes us feel the emotion. But I do believe that there's almost always a thought that happens, like exactly like what you said. If you hear a loud noise, oh my God, I'm in danger, right? And it may or may not be true, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I love that thought. And also what you said about boundaries and discomfort. Oh, I love that. That's powerful, because I'm thinking we are in this, definitely this generation, exactly what you said. People are very obsessed with boundaries. I'm going to assert my boundaries. You don't get to do this or say this or anything like that. I'm going to put all these walls up around me because I want to be in my peaceful little bubble all of the time. And that is not reality. Reality is that, you know what, when we have these moments of discomfort, like a difficult conversation or something like that, that is often what pushes us to grow, and also helps our relationships to become stronger. Or what I also say is that sometimes when we have those, like a difficult conversation, sometimes it simply brings us more information, and we can understand, is this a relationship where I want to continue? Do I want to nurture this relationship? Now that I'm understanding what you're saying and how this applies, maybe we're not compatible as friends. Maybe we're not compatible as partners because we're not aligned at this point in time. And so I love that thought. I know you're having more thoughts.
No, that's okay. I just for me, there's a lot of people who will say things like, "Oh, well, that's just the way that I am."
Yep.
Which is just as unhealthy, right? I mean, that is a very fixed mindset. And so when we're talking about trauma informed, I think we do that entire movement or whatever of complete disservice if we don't flip that to involve the resilience focus that it needs to, right? And resilience means we're growing. This is our ability to handle the hard things, right? So you can't have a fixed mindset and be resilient at the same time, right? You will
Mm,
shatter. So,
mm. So powerful.
right. So, I mean, and lots of people who are dealing with their effects of the trauma and those kinds of things, they do have a very, very fixed mindset. They can only handle, they have a very low tolerance for anything else, right? And so step one really has to be like to calming our systems down and to get to a place where we can be reflective and those kinds of things. But and practicing that so that we can build our resilience. I don't know, there's just so many layers, so many layers to that little onion, but a fixed mindset is probably one of the absolute worst things that we could do, especially for our trauma kids and for ourselves as we're dealing with things. Nobody's done. Yeah, I've reached, the ripe old age of whatever, so now I'm done.
I'm
I'm good.
healed.
Right? I'm perfect. It's all good, right? That's not how it works, right? It doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter where you are in your life. There's going to be another learning pit coming along soon where there's going to be some active struggle and some things. And if you just sit in the pit and are just going to focus on being sad, then you're never going to get anywhere else, right? And if you don't have if you get stuck in emotion, you can't actually have real connection, if that makes sense, right?
Mm,
I can't
mm.
connect with other people if I'm stuck in my own emotion. And as humans, like we're designed to connect with each other. But if we get stuck in our own heads, then that connection can't happen and there's no growth, there's no fulfillment, there's no complete circle there, right?
Okay, because so somebody listening to this now is going to say, okay, how do I get out of my emotion so that I can connect to somebody? So, what would you say to them?
it has to start with a willingness to accept the fact that you probably made some mistakes, that perhaps you need to make some changes. If you can't accept that you've screwed up, you're going to stay stuck where you are, right? So the healing starts with recognizing things. Recognize your own private logic. So you go after people and you attack first every time. Why? Why? What is it in your head that's telling you that you can't trust people? Right? Is that what it is? Right? So there has to be some space for reflection. There also has to be some space for grace. Right? We can only do as good as what we know right now. Tomorrow, I hope I'll do better because I hope I learn some things and do better tomorrow, right? So you have to give yourself some grace too, right? And like as a mom, for example, as a mom of a second round of children, I look back to how I did things that first time around and like it breaks my heart. I made so many mistakes. I was 21. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing for most things, so I was kind of making it up as I went. I feel like I'm still making it up as I go, but right? But I don't know. I didn't know any better. I didn't. And so to hold myself at a standard of what I understand now, that's not fair to me either. And I'm going to just be too sad to actually do the growing I need to do. So I have to give myself some grace there too, not dismiss it, right? Because there's still some things from way back when that I have to deal with. There's consequences, but I have to just give myself the space and some grace to grow a little bit too. I don't think any of us can do this by ourselves. We're not designed to, and I don't think it's healthy. There's definitely time where you need to meditate. You need to calm everything down and quiet everything down, right? And really allow yourself to feel some things. Most of us don't. We we react with anger because we're masking something else, right? We go online shopping because we're avoiding feeling something else. We're going to watch an entire series of a show in one day because we're avoiding feeling something else, right? So we all do it. We need to be able to, it takes some strength, I think, in order to face some of those things. That what is it that I'm trying to avoid, right? And then reaching out for help. I don't think we're supposed to do this by ourselves. There's so many people out there that are so much smarter than me. Why wouldn't I ask them questions?
Mm.
Right? So, and whether that is a counselor or whether that is an elder or just somebody whose opinion you really trust, I mean, it can happen in lots of different ways. It can happen with a coworker. It can happen with anybody. Just to give yourself some space to actually reflect and accept that somebody else has a different idea or whatever it is. Healing through your trauma doesn't have to be rehashing every single event that happened. It has to do more with acknowledging your private logic and how that affects your behavior and make changes accordingly. Sometimes when we think about going and talking to a counselor or whatever, we think, oh, well, I'm going to have to tell them my whole life story or whatever it is. And sometimes that's the right thing to do for sure, but it doesn't have to be, because there's also risk in getting caught up in that trauma as now that is my identity.
Mm.
And so it's easy for people to get stuck there. Well, that's the reason. Well, I'm a victim of this, or this happened to me, so that's why I am what I am. And that's not healthy either, right? That's only just one piece of the puzzle that you're acknowledging. Your private logic is the result of a whole bunch of other things that you had no control over, but it is your responsibility. So regardless of those things, you might never get the apology that you think you should get, right? You might never get to go and have the conversation with the person that you think you should get. And maybe it was not a specific event. It was, we grew up in poverty, and so that's why my private logic is what it is, right? So there is nothing there specific to, regardless, how I view myself and other people in the world is my responsibility to make sure I'm doing that in a healthy way.
Mm. So powerful. I love, of course, meditating and, going deep and trying to understand, our response to the world and unpacking a lot of why we do what we do. And of course, trying to take that information and use it to benefit others, right? So that we're not just staying stuck in ourself, right? Because like you said, sometimes people can definitely become used to this victim story, and it becomes their narrative, their story that they just constantly replay over and over. But something that I was wondering about is, if somebody is trying to maybe address some of their traumas or address when they're triggered, what are some strategies or things that they could do to help them with the dysregulation? I know you mentioned like therapy could be one route. Is there, like, what are some sorts of things that you recommend to people to get them through, if they're in the red zone or blue zone or, whatnot? How do we ground ourselves? How do we get back to the green zone?
So when we are dysregulated and we are stuck in our emotions, one of the things that we need to do is to bring our brain back together. And so we try to activate both sides of our brain in that. And it's different for everybody. And one of the ways to do that is we've talked before about the 5 4 3 2 1. That's one of the ways, right? So if I can activate my senses right now in this moment, then that should shut my smoke detector off for a minute, right? And bring me back to this moment. So we look for 5 things that we can see, 4 things we can hear, 3 things we can smell. And it honestly doesn't matter what order you do the senses in, as long as you've activated all of them. I just find starting with 5 things you can see is easiest to be rather than 5 things you
Mm,
can taste. But just to, right, so to activate those 5 senses. And then I always end that one with, now tell me one thing you're grateful for,
mm,
because the neurological pathway in your brain for anxiety and gratitude is the exact same. And I know that that was intentional by Creator. I absolutely do. It's like anxiety is your gas pedal towards an emotional reaction, and the gratitude, it's like a brake.
hey, can
If
you say
you
that
can,
again? Anxiety. Okay, what?
like, anxiety would be like a gas pedal on that neurological pathway towards an emotional response, and gratitude is like the brakes. So if I can, yeah, if I can think about one thing that I am grateful for, my brain cannot at the same time stay on that anxiety pathway. It's not physically
Mm,
possible. So for lots of my students that I would do this with, nobody can in the moment think of something that they're grateful for, right? Because your thinking brain is gone. So I would actually have them write it down on a sticky note in the morning when they would come to me. What's your thing today? They would write it down. I get to see my grandma later. Mom and I are going to whatever it was. And they would write it down, put it in their pocket. So then later in the day, if I find them in the hallway and they're having a bit of a anxiety thing happening, we would do our grounding. Tell me the things. Now show me your sticky note. And then focus on your puppy or whatever it was that was your grateful thing. And it switches your brain back. And it's really very, very
mm.
cool.
That's
Um,
super powerful. Thank you for
yeah.
sharing that.
And teaching people too, like things that you can do with your breath, right? Like breath work is huge. When you're a little kid and you're really upset about something and you're like and you're like really freaking out and somebody stop crying or whatever, and so you try really hard to stifle all the things and you do that as you're calming down. It's actually That's actually how it works. 2 short breaths in, 1 big breath out actually reactivates all of the things, and it calms your system down. My daughter, actually, she's so much smarter than me with her kids already. She taught them when they were little, when they were getting upset, to blow out the candles, right? So when they're to calm themselves down, and it's to the point now. I mean, my oldest grandson, he's only in grade 1, but he can tell his mom when he needs the candles, right? So
So,
he's
just
we
to clarify for some people who are maybe only listening to this podcast and won't be able to visibly see it, Jill just held up a finger and she blew out one, and then another finger blew out two, another finger blew out three. And so that's part of the candle exercise.
Yeah, yeah. Um, Lots of people your brain responds, your nervous system responds very well to walking, just stimulating both sides of your body at the same time. For me, it works best if I'm barefoot too. If I'm really upset about something and I'm recognizing that, because then I do get the grounding that I need to, but it's that left right hemisphere activation that resets your nervous system. So if you're to the point where you can recognize some of those physical triggers, like when I'm doing this with people, I ask them to recognize what zone they're in, but I also ask them to tell me, where do you feel yellow in your body, right?
Mm.
Where do you feel red in your body? Like, do you get a headache? Do you get a stomach ache? Do you get jittery? Like, where is it your jaw? I don't know if there's one gentleman that I follow. He's a mindfulness kind of guy. Andrew Dreadful Bird, his handle, I think. He has a TikTok and I follow a lot of his things, and he actually helped me a lot during COVID because he would just pop onto the screen and he would just say, so let's just take a minute. Put your feet flat on the ground, shoulders back, drop your tongue off the roof of your mouth, just breathe out, look around, and look for two things that you're grateful for in your immediate surrounding. And he's got such a calming voice too. He was able to co-regulate with people through the screen. It was really incredible.
That's so
He
cool.
actually he does wellness retreats and stuff too. I think he's in BC somewhere. It's never quite worked out for me to go to one, but I think that would be pretty cool
Wow.
on my
That's
bucket
really cool.
list.
Yeah, no kidding.
But there's lots of different techniques like that can help people in the moment. And I think if you are talking to a counselor, then they'll have lots of different ideas depending on what it is that you're working on, right? Where it is that where your circle is broken, right? The circle of courage that I refer to. So different things that you'll need.
Nice. Something that I was thinking of was that sometimes married couples, for instance, will come together and maybe one partner has experienced a lot of trauma in their life. And maybe now that they're married, they're working towards unpacking that and healing from that experience, whatever it is. And but the other party maybe wasn't aware at the beginning of the relationship, and now they're, in this committed relationship. How could that person, support somebody who is, maybe going through some kind of healing journey right now? How can we be better partners or better friends, even if that's or even someone in our family? How can we support somebody who we know is struggling?
I think our biggest way to help is to not take it personally, right? Let their struggle be their struggle. If we remember that somebody who is stuck in emotion can't make a healthy connection, right? And that's where that person might be, then it has nothing to do with us, right? We absolutely can make it worse if every time they react a certain way, we get all in their face or whatever it is. But we need to, if we're in this committed relationship with them, cut them some slack, give them some grace as they work through their things. It's not going to be pretty, right? There might be some ugly parts to it, but we have to make sure that we are not taking those things personally, that's their thing. But we also do have to protect ourselves too, right? So that's where the self-care part comes in. Self-care, it's kind of cliche at this point, but, and it's not about spa days and bubble baths, although those things are great. Like, don't get me wrong. Those are
Yeah.
great, but it's the tools that we have to help us mentally and emotionally get through the hard things, right? Like, that's what we're supposed to be doing with self-care. It's not so that we avoid. Boundaries is not necessarily self-care if we're just going to avoid everything, right? It has to be something that actually helps us do this in a healthy way. So giving them some space, not taking it personally, but still making sure that there's lots of opportunities for them to experience connection with you regardless, right? I mean, depending on what it is that they're trying to work through, maybe it's they don't have generosity in their life and that's what they need. So we need to, as their partner, make sure that there are opportunities for those things so that they can contribute, and whatever it is, it'll be very individual, but biggest thing is don't make somebody else's mess yours.
Mm. So powerful. I have really enjoyed sitting with you today, my friend. I Every time we're together, I always learn so much and I have a page of notes. I'm so excited. Thank you for sharing all that you shared. Before we go, is there anything else that maybe we haven't touched on that you've been thinking of? Oh, geez, I forgot to say this and I want to say it before we go.
I don't know if there, I mean, we talked about so many things. I guess, yeah, I guess I'm big advocator of yes, your history is what it is. You cannot change it, but you are still responsible for the person you are and are going to be. So nobody expects perfection out of anybody, but we should at least be trying to do better than we did yesterday, right? And without the blame, without the whatever, we just own our own crap.
Oh, I love that. No, and I think that's absolutely true because every one of us at some point has been dealt some cards that we didn't appreciate. When that's not to minimize, some people have gone through some really horrific things. But to also recognize that at the end of the day, we do have a responsibility in this world to the people around us. And, we don't get a free card to just be an asshole and to stay stuck there.
Right? Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
we have to definitely be working through this stuff. And that's why I have philanthropy here, because I want people to take care of themselves and to go out and help the world, because there's so much that we need to do in this world, and to recognize that we owe it to ourselves and everybody else to present the best version of ourselves that we possibly can, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is really important that we don't judge each other based on what we understand of their story either, right? I mean, you can have two people go through the exact same event and handle it completely different, and that doesn't make one person's story invalid.
Mm.
The children of divorce, right? Some kids just kind of seem to manage and whatever, and they're fine. And for another kiddo, it'll completely cripple them and they're just not okay. And it's really important that we don't judge that one kiddo and say, well, he was fine. What's wrong with you? Right? That's not what it
Mm.
is. Everybody has their own perception, their own bag of tools. And some of us don't have very many tools at all, right? We might be going through the same storm, but our boats look different.
Mm. Such a powerful reminder. Oh, yes, I love it. Well, my friend, it has been such a joy as always. I'm very excited to have all of this recorded, because I know it's one that even for myself, I'll enjoy listening to and learning from continually. So thank you so much for all of your time and your wisdom and sharing all your experiences to help all of us to move through trauma better, and to help us heal in our own ways, and also support the people who are trying to do that work too. Or maybe they'll listen to this podcast and go, you know what, it's time, I'm going to do it now. Which would be really amazing. So thank you so much for everything. I love you, lady. You're amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a very exciting, nerve-wracking experience for me.
Ah, you did amazingly. You know what? It was just so flawless, and you're just a fountain of information, and so I'm so grateful that you were able to share so much with everybody.
Mostly I just feel like I'm full of shit, but that's good. I'm glad.
Well, at least you're not arrogant. She's not full of shit, anybody. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day, my friend, and take care.
Yes, you too, and we'll have to plan an actual lunch or something soon.
Absolutely, 100%. I would love that.
Okay.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, bye.